Mark chapter 12 again. Mark chapter 12. I'm going to read these verses again about that widow woman. Verse 41, and Jesus sat over against the treasury, and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury. And many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. And I can't stop thinking about the widow and why she was poor, why she was in that situation. And Jesus knew that. He knew the situation that she was in. And I think about that. And so when I was preparing for these Sunday school lessons, Brother Wayne always says, when the Bible says therefore or wherefore, you have to go back and you have to look at the scriptures that brought you to that point. And so I thought, well, here I'm starting out, and it's not the end of Mark, but it's close to the end of chapter 12. There's 16 chapters, and it's close to the end of that chapter. I thought, well, maybe I ought to start reading in Mark 1. And so since we were doing these lessons and preparing for these lessons, I've read the book of Mark several times. And there was things that I remembered from things that I've heard or read before, and things that maybe I hadn't seen before. And then studying, you get into that a little bit more. And I'm not only thinking about the widow woman. I got to actually before this, I was thinking about the man who had all the demons cast out of him, that had the legion. And so I want to go to Mark chapter 5. And I'm going to read some verses in Mark 5, in Luke, and in Matthew. Mark chapter 5, we're going to begin with verse 1. And they came over unto the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him. And always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice, and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou clean spirit, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. Now there was there nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding. And all the devils besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. And forthwith Jesus gave him gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. They were about 2,000, and were choked in the sea. And they that fed the swine fled, and told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that was done. And they came to Jesus, and see him that was possessed with the devil, and had the legion, sitting and clothed, and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And they that saw it told them how it befell to him that was possessed with the devil, and also concerning the swine. And they began to pray him to depart out of their coast. And when he was come into the ship, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, Go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee. And he departed, and began to publish in Decapolis how great things Jesus had done for him, and all men did marvel. Now go to Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. I'm going to read the three accounts. Luke chapter 8, verse 26. And they arrived at the country of the Gadarenes, which is over against Galilee. And when he went forth to land, there met him out of the city a certain man which had devils long time, and wear no clothes, neither abode in any house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Most High, I beseech thee, torment me not. For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For ofttimes it had caught him, and he was kept bound with chains and in fetters, and he brake the bands, and was driven of the devil into the wilderness. And Jesus asked him, saying, What is thy name? And he said, Legion, because many devils were entered into him. And they besought him that he would not command them to go out into the deep. And there was there an herd of many swine feeding on the mountain. And they besought him that he would suffer them to enter into them, and he suffered them. Then went the devils out of the man, and he entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the lake, and were choked. When they that fed them saw what was done, they fled, and went and told it in the city and in the country. Then they went out to see what was done, and came to Jesus, and found the man out of whom the devils were departed, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. They also which saw it told them by what means he that was possessed of the devils was healed. Then the whole multitude of the country of the Gadarenes round about besought him to depart from them, for they were taken with great fear. And he went up into the ship and returned back again. Now the man out of whom the devils were departed besought him that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, Return to thine own house, and show how great things God hath done unto thee. And he went his way, and published throughout the whole city how great things Jesus had done unto him. Now we'll go to Matthew chapter 8. I think there's some out there that question whether this is the same account. I personally don't. And we'll talk about that. Matthew chapter 8, verse 28. And when he was come to the other side into the country of the Gergesenes, there met him two possessed with devils, coming out of the tombs, exceeding fierce, so that no man might pass by that way. And behold, they cried out, saying, What have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? And there was a great way off from them an herd of many swine feeding. So the devils besought him, saying, If thou cast us out, suffer us to go away into the herd of swine. And he said unto them, Go. And when they were come out, they went into the herd of swine, and behold, the whole herd of swine ran violently down a steep place into the sea, and perished in the waters. And they that kept them fled, and went their ways into the city, and told everything, and what was befallen to the possessed of the devils. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they besought him that he would depart out of their coast. Now there's the three accounts of these demons being, I don't know if excommunicated is the right word, but that's, they were cast out of these two men. And the first two accounts talks about one man. The second account talks about two men. And the first account talks about the Gadarenes, that Jesus went into the country of the Gadarenes. And the second, and this last account talks about, if I say it right, verse 28, Gergensens. And so I looked at these verses, and to be real honest, I think they're all the same account. And one reason is prior to all three of these, we had the same account where Jesus was on the ship and the sea was calmed, just right before that. And then the reason why they were on the ship is because they were going across I think that was this. Now I hate to say it. I can tell you here, if it was the Sea of Galilee, I'll tell you here in just 1 second. They were going across, the Sea of Galilee. And on the other side of the Sea of Galilee it's basically, it says they go into the country of the Gergensens or the Gadarenes. That country is what's referred to as Decapolis. And the best way I can explain that is if you were on the Illinois side and you took the Winfield Ferry, if it was still running, you took the Winfield Ferry and you came across, you would come into the country of Lincoln County, right? And then you would have Winfield and Foley in between. And so both these cities are separate, but they're part of the same country. And whether this be correct or not, it makes sense to me. But Matthew is speaking to one group of people, and he's going to refer to the Gergensens. And Mark and Luke are speaking to other people, and he's going to refer to the Gadarenes. Now they're separate, and there's a space in between them, and the Gadarenes are closer over to Galilee when you are not Galilee, Galilee. They're closer, so that's also kind of mentioned too. Then you get to the issue where there's two. And so I want you to go to Luke 17. Luke 17. Luke 17, verse 11. And it came to pass, as he went to Jerusalem, that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered into a certain village, there met him 10 men that were lepers, which stood afar off. And they lifted up their voices and said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And when he saw them, he said unto them, Go show yourselves unto the priest. And it came to pass that as they went, they were cleansed. And one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, and with a loud voice glorified God, and fell down on his face at his feet. Fell down on his face. He glorified God and fell down on his face at his feet. See what that says? Giving him thanks, and he was a Samaritan. And Jesus answering said, were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the 9? There are not found that return to give glory to God, save this stranger. And he said unto him, Arise, go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole. And what I just wanted to show there is there was 2 men that had demons cast out. There was one that wanted to follow Jesus. And so Mark and Luke focused on the one when they give this account. There's a fellow that I've seen some of his information, and he's a smart man. I told you there's smart men out there. There's smart people out there, and they don't always agree with me, and I don't always agree with them. But this fella, his profession is like a detective. And he searches out cold cases, things that were never solved. And so he had one thing where he talked about the 4 Gospels. And he said, people like to use things like these 2 men and Gergesene and Gadarenes, and those types of things to be critical about the Bible. Because that's what they want. They want to be critical. They're not looking for the answer. Plus, if you're not saved in the Holy Spirit, you're not going to get it. And I like to see archaeological finds that show history of the Bible. I like to see those things, but I don't need that. And I'm not concerned about this really. But this fella here that searches out cold cases, and he was an atheist at one time. He was a proclaimed atheist. And he somehow or another, he started reading the Bible, and it started making sense to him. Well, we know why it made sense to him, right? But one of the things that he talks about with the 4 Gospels, he says, as a detective, he says, if I go to a scene of a crime and there's 4 witnesses, he said, if they tell me the exact same thing, I know it was rehearsed. And he said, one person might be here, and one person might be here. One person might be over there. One person might be over there. It's the same crime, but they see it differently. And so this one can give you a clue, and this one can give you a clue, and this one here can give you a clue, and this one can give you a clue. All those clues are helpful. And that's why God did it this way. So we're in a country of Decapolis, and there's the city of Gergesa and the city of Gadarene. And they're in that country. And there was 2 men. One of them wanted to follow Jesus. I don't know about the other one. It doesn't tell us anything about the other one. So go back to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5, verse 1. And they came over into the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains. And just like the widow woman, how did he get to be in this shape? Well, we don't have the slightest idea. Did he start out living an awful life and through that became possessed of the devils? Maybe he was religious and became possessed of the devil. Maybe he was living like a really good life and then all of a sudden, click, it wasn't real to him. And remember the in the Bible where it says he cleaned his house, and then it was worse. Could have been that fella. I don't know. It doesn't tell us anything about this man. But you wonder why this with these devils, and why do so many people struggle in this world? I don't have the answers. I really don't. I don't know. You know, maybe it was drugs. Maybe he's out of his mind. And I'll tell you in the next several verses, when there's a conversation here between Christ and this man, the man's out of his head. He's not in this conversation. He is completely out of his head. When you read these verses and it says he and such, like Christ is talking to this man, Christ is talking to the legion. He's talking to the devils. They've controlled this fellow. And so sometimes when we're out and we're talking to the world, we're talking to a sinful man. And the only thing that can change that person is Jesus Christ. And that's what happened here. And so then you get down to, let's see. Let's just look at verse 15. And they come to Jesus and see him that was possessed with the devil, and had the legion sitting and clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. There's the man sitting there clothed in his right mind. Anyway, they asked Jesus to please leave because they like their pork. They like their living. They like the way they're living. These people in this area, they didn't want that. They didn't want the boat rocked. So they asked Jesus to leave. But this man, finally, this man gets to talk. Verse 18, and when he was come into the ship, he that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. That's the man. He wants to be with Jesus. And in verse 19, howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord had done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee. And from what I understand from others, I haven't researched this out, but from what I understand from others, there were works in that area. And I'd say this man, not the devils, they were gone. The man was able to go out and tell what great things God had done for him. And so, in that, before I even started thinking about the widow woman, And before I had even really truthfully read these accounts, all three of them, and looked at them closely, before that, though, I'd heard this preached many times. And so I knew about it. And so I think I was laying in bed, and I don't have the answers. I really don't have the answers. What I'm looking for is some suggestions for some prayers, for some help. But you know the situation that I'm in, where I live in Ellsbury. And then I'm going to retire here. So I'll be retired. I don't know what that means. I don't know how that all works out. And Chrissy and I, we've tried to figure out how we could move closer to this church, and we haven't figured that out. And we live in Ellsbury. And so I'm just going to honestly tell you, when I read this verse, it says, "Go home to thy friends and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath compassion on thee." And I'm leaning in that direction. Just like the vapor in the hourglass, I don't know what the future holds. Because God can turn that and shake that all around. And I may have more or less time. I don't know. But I would like for you to pray for me in that situation, because I am leaning to be where I'm at and tell people what great things God hath done for me. And I don't know how to do that, because I don't claim to be worthy. I don't claim to be the right guy. I don't claim to be a preacher. So I'm not sure exactly how to do that. And I don't think I have to. The only reason why I would be worthy is because God made me worthy in some sense of the word. I'm not perfect, but He made me. He justified and sanctified me and saved my soul. And I don't know how to do it without a preacher. I don't know how to do that. So pray for me in that. But I've been thinking about that for a long time. And then I got to thinking about the widow woman, and I don't remember how I got started on that. And then I thought, well, I need to read all these things, and there's the verses. And then I thought, well, I need to read all the accounts. And we talked about that. And just like Jesus, when it talked about the two, and one came to Jesus, I also thought about the thief on the cross. We talk about him all the time. We preach it, we teach it, we tell everybody we know about the thief on the cross. There was two of them. Who's the one that we talk about? And that's kind of how that Matthew account is. Who's the one that we talk about? We talk about the one that wanted to do what Jesus wanted him to do. That's my Sunday school lesson for today. I'll go ahead and close in a word of prayer. Lord, I thank you for each one that's here. Lord, I pray that you help us to realize that each moment is for you.